When you think of car brands, you probably think of big names like Ford, BMW, Toyota, and Chevrolet. These companies did well in the American market due to their iconic model ideas. When a company looks at how it got to where it is, they can better understand where they are now. Let's take a look at how some well-known car brands got their start in the business. Henry Ford's willingness to try new things changed the car business. In 1903, he started the Ford Motor Company.
And the tools he used were common sense, ingenuity, and perseverance, along with a natural instinct for knowing how to put machines together and make them run,
which would become the largest company in the world for designing, making, and selling cars. The Model A, which was Ford's first car, was put together at a plant in Detroit. It wasn't a huge hit, but future versions were sure to make money. The Model T was cheap, reliable, and good at what it did. Within 10 years, Model Ts made up half the cars in America. Ford made the first moving assembly line for cars, which changed the business for good. Because of this invention, Ford Motor Company could make a Model T in less than 30 seconds. Ford became the world's second largest family-owned business. When the Mustang came out in the 1960s, it was the first of the pony cars.
All vinyl upholstery, padded instrument panel, and full wheel covers. Even though Mustang is a dream, its low price is a beautiful reality. Test drive one right now at your Ford dealers in Pleasant Dreams.
The Ford Motor Company is still the biggest car company in the world, selling millions of cars each year. Mercedes-Benz is a worldwide car company that is known for making high-quality luxury vehicles. Carl Benz started Benz & C in 1883 to make engine parts for cars. Soon after that, he started making cars, starting with the Velocipede, which was the first mass-produced car. Benz kept getting better by making a car with a four-wheel suspension. In 1926, Benz company joined with Daimler, and the three-pointed star that is the Mercedes-Benz logo today was made. From that point on, it started to be put onto all the new cars. In the late 1900s, the 35 horsepower model was the first car to have the logo on it. The 300 SL Gullwing Coupe was made in the 1950s. It has unique gullwing doors that make it a dream for car collectors. This was the first SL class car and was the fastest car that could be bought at the time. During most of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, Mercedes-Benz worked on making safer cars. The conical pin door lock was developed, which made it impossible for doors to open in an accident. Also popularized were crash testing programs, the anti-lock braking system, the pre-safe system, and the attention assist. Mercedes-Benz continued to make popular cars like the C-Class and E-Class.
He lived to see his dream come true, the breakthrough of the automobile.
Chevrolet is another well-known name in the car business. It's known for making cars and trucks in the United States. Louis Chevrolet and William C. Durant came up with the idea for Chevrolet in 1911. The famous bow tie logo was made 2 years after the company was founded. After Chevrolet sold his share, Durant was left as the only owner of the company. The Series C Classic 6 was the first car that Chevrolet made. The first year, almost 3,000 cars were sold, and General Motors bought Chevrolet. At about the same time, Chevrolet started making its first trucks. In the 1920s, Chevrolet made its 1 millionth car, and by the end of the 1920s, Chevrolet had sold more cars and trucks than Ford. It was the best-selling car and truck brand. Over the years, the first-place spot went back and forth between the two brands. In the 1950s, mini models like the Bel Air, Impala, and Corvette were popular. At the end of the 1960s, the Chevrolet Camaro came on the scene to compete with the Ford Mustang. But Chevrolet didn't just stay in the US, it went international and opened its first plant outside the US in Denmark.
In the 1950s and 60s, the brand reached iconic status in the United States, with models such as the Bel Air, Corvette, Impala, Chevelle, and Camaro.
The ultimate driving machine is what BMW is known for. In the 1900s, BMW was successful in the airplane business, but in the 1920s, it switched to making motorcycles. In 1928, the company started to make cars. The first model was called Dixie.
Dixies. Dixies were small, cheap and cheerful little cars, which were actually lightly modified Austin 7s from Britain.
And then the Wartburg model came out not long after. During the 1930s, BMW made the Brescia Grand Prix 303, 326, 320, 329, 327, and 328. Soon, the focus turned to making military vehicles for the war effort. The BMW 502 V8 Super came out after the war.
BMW had great ambitions. It didn't take them long to decide to modify this car much further and to put in the BMW design of engine that then became the staple of the 1930s.
BMW 507 muscle car brought in the most money for the business. BMW Motorsport set up its own museum for cars and airplane engines. There were huge successes with the 5 Series, 3 Series, 7 Series, and 6 Series. In the 1990s, BMW came to the United States and opened a factory in South Carolina, which would become BMW's biggest factory in the world. BMW bought the British Rover Group and now owns Land Rover as a result. The BMW Z3 became more well-known after it was used in the James Bond movie GoldenEye in 1995. In the 2000s, BMW bought both Rolls-Royce and Mini. The company made the 1 Series and the X Series, which are 2 new models. BMW is now one of the most popular luxury car brands in the world. Gone but never forgotten. About 7 years ago, the last Pontiac ever produced came off the assembly line. Even though the cars are no longer being made, classic car collectors all over the world still have them. Pontiac was made by General Motors in 1926. It was named after an Indian chief. In the 1930s, Pontiac's production was merged with that of Chevrolet because it was believed Pontiac was too small and weak to survive the Depression on its own. When it was on its own again, Pontiac became the middle-class car.
After horsepower, but then went on to build commodified and forgettable cars in its later years, and then officially died October 31st, 2010.
The price of a Pontiac was somewhere between the most expensive Chevrolet and the least expensive Oldsmobile. At this time, the brand didn't try to do well. They wanted to convince people to buy a more expensive brand. In the 1950s, competition from other brands hurt trouble. On NASCAR tracks, cars like the Catalina, which was made by Pontiac, were seen. Models from the 1960s had small bodies with fins. In the late 1960s, the Firebird and GTO came out. These cars were big steps forward for the brand. The Grand Prix was a mid-priced, almost luxury coupe that sold well into the 1980s. In 1977, the movie Smokey and the Bandit brought attention to the Trans Am. In 2010, Pontiac made its last car.
In the end, GM could no longer justify creating new products for an indifferent public, and cut its losses by executing the iconic brand in 2009, with its last deeply discounted car sold in 2010. It was an undignified end to a once mighty automotive brand.
General Motors turned its attention to Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, and GMC, which are also all part of the company. Toyota Motor Sales Incorporated began in 1957. The Toyota Crown was the first full-size passenger car made by the Japanese company and the first car from Japan to be sold in the US. The Crown did well in Japan, but it was too expensive for the US market. Because of this, production on it ceased. The Toyota Corolla was made, and it was the first Toyota vehicle to become popular in the United States. And by the end of the 1960s, Toyota was the third most popular imported brand in the US. The Toyota Corolla became the passenger car that sold the most units ever. Millions of them were sold in thousands of places around the world. At the beginning of the 1970s, Toyota sold its millionth car. Toyota is now the most popular import brand in the United States, overtaking Volkswagen. And by the middle of the 1980s, Toyota was the first foreign car company to sell more than 1 million cars. Toyota was reaching important goals and becoming known around the world as a marker of high-quality cars. The company has multiple plants in North America alone. There are factories in California, Alabama, Texas, and Kentucky, just to name a few. With the Prius, a hybrid car that gets good gas mileage, Toyota also took steps towards making a more eco-friendly car. Those were the most iconic car brands in their histories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.